Robin was actually a very cute, handsome little boy growing up. He didn't give trouble to any of us. He was always well behaved, mostly, I would say. I loved him dearly. I enjoyed speaking with him and seeing him, hanging out with him, even when we were growing up. He was a very intense young man, but very polite, mainly very quiet as a child growing up. He liked to tinker with, in those days as a young chap, with scale-lex trick. I don't know whether you know anything about it. It's like playing with small little cars on a rail line. And he liked to sit in his room and read a lot.
He really didn't want to spend much time with me. I was the bratty little, I think 3 years younger than he was at the time, and feeling lonely at home in the afternoons and wanting someone to play with. And just one day, he was reading a magazine on the couch in the living room, and I said, come and play, come on Robin, let's go play. And he said, if you don't leave me alone, I'm going to beat you. and apparently I didn't leave him alone, and he rolled up it was a motor magazine, rather thick one, and he proceeded to beat me on my back and totally winded me, and I went running to Mummy and Daddy, whoever was home, of course, and that was not the best memory of Robin, but that was it, really. He just an older brother who really didn't want to spend much time with his little sister.
I don't know whether he struggled with mental illness, because you must remember he grew up in the 50s. We never heard so much about mental illness in those days, or even understood the concept. Looking back, possibly, because he was intense. He's not a frivolous young man, and he probably kept a lot of his thoughts to himself. I don't know.
I know I came to England a couple of times, visited him, went to an ice skating rink, I remember that, in London, and we visited Auntie Maggie together. And
my memory of Robin is that he was a very hard-working young man. He was ambitious. He strived to do well, and in fact he did. He had great achievements. He usually topped his classes. He obtained an electrical engineering degree from University of Newcastle, and then he came out to Malaya for a little while. He worked in Negros Sembilan in a company in which my father had invested in. Somehow it didn't turn out so well, so he returned back to the UK, and it was at the time of the Falklands War. Jobs were not easy to get. He got a job with Hambros selling insurance. I don't think he really liked it. From what I understand, it was a rainy, icy January night. He was driving back from Guildford towards London, and somehow his car slipped over an embankment and rolled down a hill. About 24 hours later, there were some council workmen who had a job of work to do there, and they discovered this car upside down. They went near, saw this person upside down, passed out. Then he was rushed into Guildford Hospital, and he incurred a back of the stem injury, which affected and he was in a coma. He only survived because he was so cold. He was like frozen.
It wasn't till after his accident, when I heard of his accident, and then left with my mum and dad to England to be with him at the hospital in Guildford, where he was in a coma for about a month. I was there for a couple of weeks, going every day with my mum to talk to him, hold his hand, and you know, just talk to him. They wanted us to talk to him and give him a sense that there were people who loved him around him.
And luckily, my brother-in-law Martin from New York came in with my sister, and they organized that he be flown to New York. For about 18 months, he was being rehabilitated because it affected his gait, the way he walked, his thought processes. His short-term memory was very poor. He remembered things way back in the past, and he got angry very much faster than normal. And after a stint in the USA, he came out to Malaya to stay with my parents. But it was very hard for him to adjust to the life in Malaya. And eventually, he went back to the UK and he tried to look for a job.
I eventually saw Robin again. It was a year after he'd spent it in New York City. He had been living with my sister Priscilla and brother-in-law Martin, and gone to the Rusk Institute for brain injured therapy, and he then was coming home to see if he could get on with his life. He apparently applied for many jobs when he came home. He was living with Mum and Dad in Johor Bahru, and I'd see him every so often. He'd come water skiing with us on Sundays, and he was having trouble with coordination. He never was very sporty. He wasn't the sporty one of us in the family, and he had trouble getting up on skis, and so that really wasn't for him. He tried to get a job in Singapore, but they turned him down for his citizenship because Singapore had given it up. He'd given it up, and Singapore wouldn't give it back to him. Anyway, so he then, one day, I don't know if you know the story. Oh, of course you do. It was Deepavali, and Michael had come down from Kuala Lumpur, and they'd gone visiting with Mum and Dad. Robin didn't want to go. He stayed home, and they came back, and Mummy couldn't get into the bedroom. Robin had locked the door. Apparently, she called down to Michael, who came up and convinced Robin to open the door.
And my brother found him in the bathroom. He had found him in the bathroom he had slit his wrist. And he had told my brother, even that I can't do successfully.
And wasn't dying fast enough, he said, apparently, and terribly sad. They called the doctor. The family doctor came, and from then on, it was, what are we going to do with Robin, you know?
And he tried to attack my father on one occasion.
That same day, while they were all figuring out what to do with Robin, he come downstairs, and Mummy warned Michael, "Watch out, Michael, Robin's coming downstairs." And Robin headed over to a wall where there was a samurai sword, one of Daddy's collection, and he unsheathed the sword and went for my father, blaming him for all his woes, and they rugby tackled him down. Anyway, that sort of determined that he wasn't ever going to be living with Mum and Dad anymore, and he was taken to hospital that day, and that's where he spent his days before he flew back to London.
and it was just very difficult for him. Eventually he went back to England because he had a UK citizenship, and he came under the healthcare of the United Kingdom. And from what we learnt later, he tried very hard to get jobs. In fact, we found a file on him in which there must have been a few hundred applicants for jobs, and then he had filed also a few hundred of the rejections on the job. I was in Nelson, British Columbia. Priscilla, my sister, was in Colorado. She was with family, my father and my mother, in Colorado, and she was alerted about the same time. We both then flew to England and learnt that he had jumped from the top of the London Hilton. London Hilton is made up of 2 towers, and he fell on top of the second tower. And he was then discovered, and they found out who he was, and a relative had made a phone call to alert us about his death. We came to stay in the Bull Hotel in Gerrard's Cross, and we dealt with the funeral arrangements. We organized a reception after the funeral, which was held in St. Mary's Church. The service was held in St. Mary's Church in the Denham village. And the reason why we chose Denham was in the later part of his life, he spent a lot of time with Peter Chong, our good friend, and his family, who were very kind to him, gave him a lot of their time. And the church in Denham village is a very quaint, lovely old church, and we arranged for him to be buried there.
Well, it's just terribly sad, you know, a life wasted, a brother I didn't really get to know very well, but of course I loved him because he was my brother, and just very sad it didn't work out for him.
How do I think about Robin now? I think of him a lot. In fact, when I do, I have a stone in my heart. It's just painful, because he was a lovely young brother. We got on well, we did a lot of things together, and it was like a wasted life. It makes me sad to think of him.
Every time we come to England, we go visit Robin's grave in Denham village. It was a sweet church, really, and I make every attempt to try and clean up his gravesite and plant something there. And this year we planted sedum, and I don't think the graveyard or the church has enough funds really to maintain the gravesite. It's rather sad. And here we are at the Bull Hotel, where they held the reception after his service, and it's lovely. It's a lovely, lovely place, and I feel at peace. And but it's rather just a sad event in someone's life to lose their brother, you know.